Samantha had always loved old things, the kind of objects that carried stories within their cracks and scratches. When she moved into her new apartment, a small one-bedroom rental in an aging Victorian building, she was delighted to find an antique mirror left behind by the previous tenant. It was tall, its surface slightly warped with age, framed in dark wood, adorned with intricate carvings of twisted vines and strange, staring faces. She placed it against the wall in her bedroom, opposite her bed. At night, when the lights were off, it caught the faint glow of the street lamp outside, its glass reflecting just enough of the dim light to create eerie shapes in the darkness. The first time Samantha noticed something strange, she had been getting ready for bed. She turned to switch off the lamp on her nightstand, catching a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror. But there was someone behind her. She whipped around, heart hammering, but the room was empty. Her breath caught in her throat as she turned back to the mirror. There was nothing unusual anymore, only her own pale face staring back at her. Maybe she was just tired. She forced herself to look away, convincing herself it was a trick of the dim lighting. But as the days passed, the strange reflections didn't stop. Sometimes, when she walked past the mirror quickly, she caught flickers of movement in its depths, dark silhouettes just at the edge of her vision. Other times, she saw shadows standing in the corner of the reflection, where, in reality, there was nothing but empty space. The worst part was that these figures weren't random. They didn't simply appear and vanish. They were always the same, 3 indistinct shapes standing still, watching. They never moved, never changed, except for one thing. Each day they seemed a little closer. At first, Samantha tried to convince herself that the strange reflections were just figments of her imagination, shadows playing tricks, stress, maybe a side effect of the lack of sleep she had been getting since moving into her new apartment. But as the days stretched into weeks, the figures in the mirror became harder to ignore. They weren't just standing there anymore. They were moving. The first time she noticed, she had been brushing her hair, her eyes barely focused on the mirror. As the bristles ran through her long, dark strands, she saw something in her peripheral vision. Just a flicker, a slight shift. She froze. The 3 shadowy figures that had been standing in the reflection were no longer in the same positions as before. One of them had tilted its head slightly, as if watching her more intently. Another had shifted its arm. Her breath quickened, her pulse a frantic rhythm in her throat. She turned around sharply. The room was empty, but when she turned back to the mirror, the figures had returned to their original, motionless state. She told herself it was nothing. She had imagined it. Her mind was playing tricks on her. But the figures continued to change, growing bolder with each passing day. Sometimes, when she walked past the mirror, she saw their heads turn, just slightly, just enough to show they were following her movement. Other times, she would find them standing closer than before, their indistinct features pressing against the edge of the glass, as though testing its boundaries. She avoided looking at the mirror whenever she could, but that didn't stop the growing sense of unease from creeping into every part of her life. Nights became the worst. She would wake up feeling like someone was in the room with her. The air would feel thick, suffocating. The silence would press down on her ears. And each time she dared to open her eyes, she would see it, the faint glow of the mirror catching the dim light from the street outside. She never saw movement directly, but she could feel it. Then, One night, she made a mistake. She woke up suddenly, her throat dry, a strange feeling of dread settling deep in her stomach. The room was silent, too silent. The usual distant hum of the city outside felt muted, as if something had sucked all the sound from the air. Slowly she turned her head toward the mirror. Her heart slammed against her ribs. One of the figures was right there, standing inches from the glass. No longer in the background, no longer a distant shadow. It was close now, too close. Close enough that she could almost make out the contours of a face, though it was blurred, indistinct, like something submerged underwater. And then, it smiled. Samantha shot up, a strangled scream caught in her throat. Her body trembled as she stared at the mirror, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The figure wasn't smiling anymore. It was still, its face unreadable once again. For hours she lay awake, watching the mirror, too afraid to close her eyes. By the time dawn broke, exhaustion pulled her under, but even sleep brought no relief. Her dreams were filled with dark figures standing over her bed, whispering in voices she couldn't understand. The days that followed were unbearable. She covered the mirror with a bedsheet, hoping that if she couldn't see it, the figures would stop appearing. But that only made it worse. Even though she couldn't see them, she could feel them. The heavy sensation of being watched never left her. Worse, strange things began happening around the apartment. Objects were never where she left them. Lights flickered at random, even though the wiring had never been an issue before. At night, she heard faint rustling sounds, like the movement of fabric. One evening after returning home late from work, she found the bedsheet she had placed over the mirror, lying in a crumpled heap on the floor. Her stomach twisted. She had tied it securely that morning. There was no way it could have fallen on its own. With a deep breath, she forced herself to look at the mirror. The figures were there, but now there were 4. She stumbled backward, her pulse roaring in her ears. There had always been 3. Now, a new figure stood beside them. It was different. The others were shadowy, their features blurred. But this one had shape. Its face was almost visible, though it seemed slightly out of focus, like a poorly tuned photograph. And something about its posture, the way it stood, made her stomach churn with an inexplicable sense of familiarity. She didn't sleep that night. Over the following days, she tried everything. She avoided the mirror as much as possible. She tried staying out of her apartment, spending long hours at work or in coffee shops, just to delay coming home. She even considered getting rid of the mirror entirely, but the idea of touching it, of moving it, made her skin crawl. And still, the figures persisted. The 4th one became clearer with each passing day. And then, she realized something horrifying. It looked like her. Panic gripped her. She started documenting the changes, taking photos of the mirror at different times of the day. Each time, the 4th figure became sharper, more defined. Its features slowly took shape until one evening, there was no denying it. It was her reflection, but it wasn't her. It stood in the mirror, watching, its expression blank, but knowing, a grotesque mimicry of her own form. And then, it moved. Not a small flicker, not a subtle shift. This time, it stepped forward, pressing its hands against the inside of the glass. Its lips curled upward into a slow, deliberate smile. A cold wave of terror washed over her as she stumbled backward. The mirror rippled like the surface of water disturbed by a single drop. And then, she was falling. Her stomach lurched as the world twisted. The room stretched and warped around her, darkness closing in from all sides. The last thing she saw before everything went black was her own reflection. No, the copy, standing outside the mirror, looking down at her with a wicked grin. And then, she was gone. Samantha's scream never left her throat. One moment, she was in her bedroom, stumbling away from the mirror. The next, she was plunging into suffocating darkness. It was as though the world had swallowed her whole, pulling her down, twisting and stretching her in impossible ways. Her body felt weightless, like she was falling through water. But there was no water, only the sensation of sinking deeper into something thick and cold. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. She landed hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. The silence was deafening. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her hands pressing against a floor that felt smooth and cold, like polished glass. A strange, dull light illuminated the space around her. She wasn't in her bedroom anymore. The walls stretched endlessly in all directions, curving slightly, as though she was trapped inside a massive, hollow sphere. Their surfaces gleamed reflective but imperfect, their warped distortions making her feel dizzy. Her own reflection stared back at her from every angle, though something about it felt wrong. And then she heard it, a faint tapping sound, distant at first, then another, and another. The sound multiplied in eerie rhythm echoing all around her. Samantha turned sharply, her breath catching in her throat. The figures were here. They stood in the reflections of the walls, no longer mere silhouettes, but tangible, real. They moved now, not hesitantly, not subtly, but with purpose. Their faces remained blurred, shifting and flickering like static on an old television. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it, her copy. It stood just outside the mirror's surface, back in her apartment, in the world she had just been torn from. It was her. It had her face, her body, her posture, but its expression was different. There was something cold in its eyes, something unnatural in the way it moved. A smile crept across its lips, slow, deliberate, knowing. A horrible realization settled over her like a suffocating weight. She was no longer in the real world. She had been pulled into the other side, the world behind the glass. And the thing standing in her bedroom was no longer a reflection. It had taken her place. Samantha pounded against the glassy floor, screaming, begging, but no sound came out. Her voice was lost in the empty void. The figures in the reflections watched, unmoving, their featureless faces pressed against the distorted glass walls, whispering words she couldn't understand. She turned, desperate, searching for a way out, but there was nothing. No door, no break in the endless walls, just reflections. Then she saw something that made her blood run cold. Beyond the curved glass, in the world she no longer belonged to, her copy was moving. It was stepping away from the mirror, stretching its arms, rolling its shoulders, getting comfortable in its new body. It turned its head slightly as though testing its movements. And then it walked toward the bedroom door. It was leaving. It was stepping into her life. No, she whispered, but the word was swallowed by the silence of the mirror world. She ran toward the glass, pressing her hands against it. The surface rippled beneath her touch, but it wouldn't break. The distorted walls only reflected her panic back at her, twisting her expression into something monstrous. And then, the figures moved. They were no longer in the reflections. They were stepping out. One by one, the shadowed figures emerged, peeling themselves from the mirrored surfaces like ink bleeding into water. Their bodies were tall, gaunt, shifting between solidity and shadow. Their faces remained blurred, shifting like unstable images. They surrounded her. Samantha backed away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The figures did not speak. They did not reach for her. Instead, they watched. A horrible thought crept into her mind. Had they all been like her once? People who had been pulled into the mirror. Copies who had replaced them, leaving them trapped here, forgotten. Her stomach twisted. Was this what awaited her? Would she too become one of them? A faceless echo waiting in the glass for another unfortunate soul to take her place. No, she whispered, shaking her head. No, no, no. She turned, searching for anything, any way out. Then she noticed something strange. One of the mirrored surfaces no longer reflected her. It reflected her bedroom. It showed the world she had been taken from, and standing in that world was her copy. But the copy was no longer alone. It stood in the middle of the bedroom, staring directly at the mirror, staring at her, and beside it, faint but unmistakable, were new shadows, more figures, the ones who had been trapped before her. Samantha's breath caught. The copy's expression shifted just slightly. Its smile faltered. For the first time, it hesitated. The shadows were gathering around it now, the same way they had gathered around her. And then, slowly, they reached for it. A ripple passed through the mirror, and the copy's face twisted in horror. It realized it had stolen her place, but now the cycle was turning again. Samantha watched as the figures in the real world pulled at her copy, their blurred hands clawing at its form. Its smile vanished, replaced by something else, fear. It tried to step away, but the glass shimmered and bent. The figures wrapped around it, dragging it back toward the mirror. Samantha felt a sudden pull, a shift in the air. The walls around her trembled. The cycle was reversing. And then she fell. Samantha gasped as she slammed back into her body. The air rushed into her lungs, sharp and cold. Her vision blurred, her limbs tingling with a strange numbness. She was in her bedroom. She was back. Her knees hit the wooden floor, her body trembling. The mirror loomed in front of her, its surface rippling like disturbed water. And on the other side, her copy was trapped. Its face was twisted in a silent scream, its hands pounding uselessly against the glass. The shadows in the mirror wrapped around it, pulling it deeper into the void. Its eyes, her eyes, locked onto hers, filled with terror. Then it vanished. The mirror stilled. The surface became nothing more than glass once again. Samantha's breath came in ragged gasps. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her body weak, as though she had been drained of something vital. The apartment was silent. The air felt different. She turned to the mirror, staring at her own reflection. Her real reflection. No shadows, no figures, just her. And yet, deep in the glass, barely visible, something shifted. A whisper of movement, a faint shadow, waiting, watching. The cycle was never truly broken.